All right, everybody. So it's 4 after. I think we will get started. So welcome. You'll probably hear me dinging and admitting people as we go, but my first request is just to make sure everyone's muted so that we can, have a good sound here, and to notify everybody that we are recording the presentation portion of this so that we can share it on our website, hoping that people that are not able to join us can still benefit from the information. So if for those of you that are not familiar with me, I don't know most people at Lane because there's a lot of you families, and it's wonderful. I'm one of the social workers at Lane Tech, and my name is Laura McLaughlin-Kantowitz, and I work with students who are coming back from hospitalization. I work as the crisis social worker. I do groups. One of the regular education support staff, along with the counselors. So there's a variety of things that I do at Lane Tech, and also do outreach, school outreach and parent outreach. So I'm very happy to see that all of you are so interested in this important topic. I would like to, and I'm going to put my name and my email in the chat. If you have questions, we would definitely like to wait till the end after the presentation is over. Your questions will not be recorded. So we encourage people to ask questions. We will have roughly about a half an hour for questions, depending on how long the presentation takes. But, please be mindful to use brevity. And, if there's a question that you have that you want more information on, please email me to follow up. And I will do my best to answer that after the presentation this week. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Stuart Shankman, and we're so happy to have him. He is a professor and chief psychologist in behavioral sciences at Northwestern University. And the research assistant that will be joining him tonight is Savannah Buchanan. So appreciate them. This is the first of a 3-part series, a parent series that we're doing one a month. And I believe all of you received the save the date for the next 2 presentations, but if not, please reach out to me and I will reshare that. We'll reshare it again as well with a similar situation with an RSVP for the next one as well. So thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and take my mic off, but if anyone needs anything, please let me know. And I'm going to share my information right now. The floor is yours, Dr. Shankman.
Great. Thanks, Laura, for that introduction, and thank you all for logging in and hearing about this really important topic about stress and anxiety in teens. And I also just want to say, that it's really amazing to have these types of programs at your school. So I strongly encourage you to try and attend these, and especially with all the mental health crises that we're all experiencing and our teens are experiencing during the pandemic. I think having these types of programming that Laura's having is a real treat for you all, and super beneficial. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can you all see do you see my notes, or do you see my presentation part? It always mixes us up with PowerPoint.
I'm not seeing
Neither.
The presentation right now.
Okay. Let's try it this way. All right. How about now?
Yes, I see it now.
Great.
And no notes, it's the presentation. Thank you.
Beautiful. Great. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about stress and anxiety in teens. And just at the end, we're going to talk about, I'm going to mention a couple of research studies that we're doing that are ongoing research studies that we're looking to recruit participants for. So I'll have our email and phone number there if you're interested in those, or just kind of have questions about my research lab and my work sort of in general. So as Laura said, I'm a professor and chief psychologist in the Department of Psychiatry at Northwestern University. And just to give you guys an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today, First, we're going to talk about like what is stress and anxiety. Are they similar? Are they different? What do we mean by these terms? Then I'm going to talk about this cognitive behavioral model of anxiety. So this model of like what is anxiety and how our cognitions, our cognitive activities and behaviors sort of interact in creating this condition that we call anxiety. I'll talk a little bit about the neurobiology of stress and anxiety, specifically focusing on the HPA axis and stress. I think some people are kind of interested in sort of the biological bases, or at least biological correlates of stress and anxiety. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Then we'll talk about the impact of stress and anxiety on sleep. I think a lot of parents of teens are very concerned about the sleep behavior of their youth, of their teens. And so we talk a little bit about the role of stress and anxiety in sleep. Similarly with worry, like what is worry, this term, and what we mean by worry, and at what point should you be worried about worry? And last, and probably most importantly, I'm going to talk about how to reduce stress and anxiety. And these are going to be focusing on interventions for teens, but I think a lot of them are applicable to adults as well. So I think for your parents out there, that maybe you can direct benefit from this as well as ways to help your teen. Okay, so what do we mean by stress and anxiety? Stress is a feeling of an emotional or physical tension. So it's a feeling you have inside, and it's often in response to an external situation or event. So stress, I think, is a word that a lot of people sort of throw around, sort of meaning, oh, I'm stressed, but in this context, we're not talking about sort of a stress that you would have from a physical stress that you'd have, like a stress in your ankle, or a stressor in some other bone, but really it's this emotional feeling that one has inside. And notice in the definition the word physical tension. So stress very much manifests in the body. So you see a lot of tension in shoulders and in back and in hands and in facial expressions. So it very much manifests in very physical ways. Anxiety is sort of it's related to stress, but it's a little different. And you can think about anxiety as a specific reaction to stress, but really characterized by a persistent feeling of apprehension or dread. So it's this more long-standing feeling of stress, as opposed to like, oh, I'm stressed for this evening because I might have a test tomorrow, or a big exam, or a date, or some other event coming up. That would be more stress. Anxiety, you can think of as a more persistent feeling that a teen, or yourself may have. So it's more about the duration that differentiates anxiety from stress. But importantly, both are part of the natural body's fight or flight response and the perception of danger. So, I think and there's often a stigma associated with like anxiety or stress or sort of mental health things in general. But it's important to sort of think about that anxiety and stress really are, when the body or the organism sort of perceives danger. It's how the body sort of responds to this be the perception of danger or actual danger. And we all talk about the fight, flight, or freeze response. This is what stress and anxiety come from. But like I said, it's stress and anxiety are sort of natural sort of human experiences, natural human events. But when do stress and anxiety become problematic? And it's really about the duration. If it lasts longer than expected, and particularly if it lasts longer after the stressful event has ended. So if your teen has an upcoming tryout, or a big event coming up, or a test or something, they may experience stress and anxiety, and it may be upsetting to them, significantly upsetting to them. But it's really you start to maybe wonder, is this problematic if it lasts longer than expected, and particularly if it lasts longer after the event ended. So if they're still experiencing anxiety even after the event or the situation sort of ends, then it might be something to kind of look into. Also, if it adversely affects and interferes with key domains of life. So, anxiety can be motivating, actually. Like if you feel anxious situation that may get you to study harder, or may get you to work harder in preparation for the event. But if it seems to interfere in other domains of your life, if your schoolwork is significantly suffering because you're stress and anxiety, if your social situation simply suffers, so you're no longer hanging out with friends, you're no longer responding to communication from friends or family, or if it's really straining relationships, that's when stress and anxiety become problematic. It's this impact on your domains of functioning that is really important to attend to. So not necessarily the intensity of the stress or the intensity of the anxiety, but where's what we call the impairment? Where's the impact on the teen's functioning? That's something very much to attune to. Now, normally up to this point, I've been talking about sort of maybe more acute stressful events, or like I said, a test, or if they have a tryout or some more time circumscribed stressor. But chronic stressors as well can negatively impact the body, especially the immune and digestive system. And so I think, whenever I talk about the chronic stress, the first thing that people come to mind these days is the COVID-19 pandemic, a chronic stressor that really the world has been dealing with for 2 years now. And this chronic stressor very much impacts the body. And there's been a ton of research coming out on the negative impacts of the pandemic on people's immune and digestive system. So it becomes this sort of cyclical thing that your immune system is impacted, your digestive is impacted, you're stressed about that, and then that affects your immune system and digestive system even more, and you get this sort of vicious cycle. So just some features that point to anxiety, particularly when anxiety becomes problematic. If you see severe irritability, and this isn't just irritability of normal teen angst, but more of if it's sort of really chronic irritability that never resolves itself. Restlessness. If you see sort of a fidgetiness of like hand wringing and just an inability to sit still, that could be a sign of anxiety. It's extreme fatigue, just being drained all the time and having no energy. Trouble concentrating. I'll talk about the effect of the HPA axis on concentrating in a little bit. But where there's trouble concentrating can be a sign of anxiety. Difficulty sleeping, muscle tension, as I mentioned before, sort of tension in your arms and your back, other parts of your body. And most importantly, not being able to stop or control worry. Worry is a sort of natural cognitive mental process. And if you can control or at least slow down worry, that's a good sign. But if the worry becomes out of control, that's when to start to maybe seek help. So the cognitive behavioral model of anxiety really talks about these four components that you see on this slide here that really interacts. You see arrows pointing in all directions, right? So there's these four components that interact in a sort of a vicious circle. So you might have the behavioral components of anxiety, such as avoidance. So you avoid hanging out with friends. You avoid interactions with other people more generally. You might have anger outbursts. You might use substances. Those are sort of behavioral correlates or the behavioral aspects of anxiety. The physiological aspect of anxiety are things like racing heart, nausea, muscle tension. The emotional components are emotions like fear, dread, panic, sadness. The cognitive or thought component of anxiety would be thoughts that go through your head of what if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? So as I said before, these four components interact. So you might have racing heart that might lead to the thoughts of, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Am I having a heart attack? Which might lead to feelings of fear, which might prevent you from avoiding activities that might raise your heart further, raise your heart rate further, which is the behavioral components, which lead to additional thoughts that are self-defeating thoughts. Well, I can't do anything right. And again, you get this sort of vicious cycle that could go round and round across these different components. Quick side note, I often get asked, like, well, what's the difference between emotions and thoughts? So like those bottom two boxes on the bottom. And they are related. They're both, I guess, sort of the mental side of anxiety. But the way to really differentiate emotions from thoughts is if you can finish the sentence, I feel blank, then that's an emotion. So I feel dread, I feel fear, I feel panic. If it says, I feel, what if I embarrass myself? That's not really, that doesn't grammatically make sense. And the reason this distinction is important is because when we do interventions, which we'll talk about in a little bit, we often intervene on the thoughts, trying to understand the thoughts, trying to challenge the thoughts, trying to work through the thoughts. And it's through that mechanism that we can ultimately impact on the emotions. So the HPA axis is this biological system that plays a really critical role in the stress and anxiety response. And you can think of it as this sort of the central stress response system in the body. So there are these three components, which I don't have in here. The H stands for the hypothalamus. The P is pituitary gland, and the A is the pituitary gland, and the A is the adrenal gland. And there are these feedback loops, which you can see. Let's see, where's my cursor? These feedback loops that sort of ultimately feedback to the different components here. And one of the outcomes, or outputs, I should say, of the HPA axis is this hormone called cortisol. And it's this pathway of access that leads to ultimately this hormone of cortisol that that gets secreted in your blood. You can see it in people's saliva and urine and other fluids. And cortisol helps, is this hormone that helps to mobilize the body's energy during threatening situation. Now, cortisol is a good hormone. Like, you want to have cortisol in your body. If you don't have cortisol, you have a lot bigger problems. You need to see a neuroendocrinologist to help with that. So it's not that, oh, cortisol is a bad hormone, I don't want to have any cortisol in my body. But it is about trying to regulate your cortisol and try to control maybe when cortisol gets released, or how often it gets released, or the intensity in which it gets released. Because when cortisol is doing its thing, it's going to increase blood pressure, it's going to increase blood sugar, it's going to curb non-essential biological processes. And again, like I said, it exerts this negative feedback response to the hypothalamus. And ideally, when cortisol is working like it's supposed to, it's going to shut off the stress response after the threat is over. But again, the HPA axis can sometimes go awry. And chronic stress can cause the HPA axis to be overactivated for long periods of time. So again, long after maybe the stressor went away, or the HPA axis might just be activated for too long a period of time. And if you have overproduction of cortisol, this can lead to a suppressed immune system, which again, during a time of COVID, when you have viruses running around, is you want to have your strongest immune system possible. It can lead to high blood pressure, poor sleep, or general abnormal circadian functions, which I'm going to talk about in the sleep section a little bit. Chronic inflammation. So not just like inflammation that you would have after like a cut on your hand, but more these inflammatory markers that sort of circulate throughout the body that can damage other biological systems. Increased fatigue, weight gain, and again, as we're talking about today, anxiety and depression. Again, just to summarize, that cortisol is a good hormone. It's a normal hormone that responds to stress. But when cortisol is overproduced, it can lead to these sort of chronic difficulties that you're seeing here. As alluded to before, I'm going to talk a little bit about sleep, because stress and sleep really share this complicated bidirectional relationship where stress leads to sleep problems, and sleep problems lead to stress. And disrupted sleep can result from this abnormal stress response and really be impacted significantly by anxiety, and then similarly affect anxiety the next day and during the evening as well. And of course, it's related to insomnia. It's a sleep disorder that affects the individual's ability to fall asleep and remain asleep. Now, when we talk about sleep disturbances, we often kind of differentiate different stages of the sleep cycle. So it could be the relative imbalance between your REM sleep and your non-REM sleep. But it's also, you can think more broadly, there's kind of 3 stages of sleep. There's falling asleep, staying asleep, and then ultimately you wake up in the morning. And people often vary, and there's a lot of research on this, that they have sort of a kind of a when they have sleep problems, they have sort of a go-to stage that seems to be particularly disrupted. So people might have a ton of trouble falling asleep, but once they're asleep, they're fine. They stay asleep and they don't wake up too early. Other people have no problem falling asleep, but it's their middle of the night insomnia, where they wake up in the middle of the night and they have problems in the middle of the night and trouble falling back asleep. But then once they do fall back asleep, they then sleep all the way to their alarm and they're fine. So it's really middle of the night insomnia. Or they have early morning insomnia, where they fall asleep fine at night, they stay asleep, but they just chronically wake up too early, long before their alarm. So when we'll talk about interventions, it's important to sort of know, well, which is your type of insomnia that you have, if you have an insomnia. Worry is another important aspect of stress and anxiety. And worry is a repetitive, uncontrollable thought where people jump around from different topics very quickly. And uncontrollable, I underline here, because that's a really important component of worry. So it's not just I have this test tomorrow and I'm thinking about it, but it's you can't control it. You can't stop the worry. The thoughts are going a million miles a minute. And also they're jumping around from topic to topic. So it's not just I have this test tomorrow. It's, well, I have this test tomorrow. I also have this problem with my significant other, and I have this problem with my family. And there's this test tomorrow, but I also need to do my job. I have my job after school. And if I don't do study for this test tomorrow, then I'm gonna not be able to function well on my job, and then I might get fired. And so it's these, again, jumping from topic to topic to topic.
Dr. Shankman, can I join you for a moment in this?
Sure.
So I often describe this to the students I work with as the worry hop. And you can kind of put a visual to it, like this very anxious little rabbit or bunny jumping from, place to place in the outside. And it's the thoughts that take over that you can't really control. And as Dr. Shankman mentioned earlier, one of the interventions and techniques to use is to challenge those thoughts. And, I'm sure he'll talk about that more in the intervention side of things. So I don't know, that's to me, at least the worry hop is a nice way for me to describe it in a less clinical term to the students, to help them visualize what is going on in their brain, to help them understand.
Exactly.
You could also mention your research study, Dr. Shankman, in the chat. So just so you know, I wanted to alert everybody that toward the end of the presentation, we'll be educated about the ongoing research study and information as to how to participate if you're interested.
Great, thanks for that. As Laura said, these thoughts, they tend to be, and I like that term, worry hop. I gotta remember that. It's great. And they tend to be repetitive and obsessive thoughts, but also they're very future oriented. So worry is, what will happen? What if this happens? It's your thoughts are on the future and not on the present. So one of the interventions is to really try to focus on, well, what am I feeling in the present? What's going on in the here and now? And getting your child's head out of these future scenarios and focusing on the here and now. And again, I said this is the cognitive aspect, or one of the mental aspects of anxiety. Okay, so let's talk intervention. And there's lots of different interventions that are out there to help with stress and anxiety. So I'm just going to talk about sort of a few of them. One that seems that has a great deal of research supporting it are various relaxation techniques. And these are things just to try to relax the body. So if you think about that, let's see if I can jump back quickly. Maybe not that quickly. Okay, if you think about this cognitive behavioral model of anxiety, you have these physiological components. You have the increased heart rate and nausea. So if we can intervene here, if we can relax the body, if we can slow the heart rate down, if we can reduce the muscle tension you have in your shoulders, that's going to sort of throw a monkey wrench. What's the expression? Throws a monkey wrench into the system. I think I said the expression right. Throws a monkey wrench into the system and will impact, that the thoughts will then maybe not be as racing as fast. You're going to relax the body, then maybe the emotions will get better, and maybe there'll be less avoidance. So relaxation is a really, really important way to intervene to kind of break this vicious cycle here. So there's a couple of different ways. Where are we? Here we go. There's a couple of different relaxation techniques. One is a deep breathing exercise, and people think, well, breathing, yeah, I know how to breathe. We all know how to breathe. We got that as soon as we were born. But to breathe from your belly and to do long breaths. And the key thing with breathing exercises, yes, you want them to be long, but it's really, really important to focus on the exhale. So a lot of people, they might do and then a quick exhale. You don't want to do that. It's got to be the long exhale. There have been a lot of studies on this actually showing that it's the exhalation that's really the most important. So I always tell clients that I work with that when they do the breathing to really focus on maybe counting to 5 or 6 on the exhale. So the long inhale in, sticking your belly out, not breathing from the chest, but breathing from the stomach, and then exhaling out for at least 5 seconds. And really, again, focusing on that exhalation is super important. Progressive muscle relaxation is another way to relax, and this is a sort of there's a lot of different ways to do it, and there's apps out there for these interventions that if people are interested in, and websites as well. But you sort of focus on different muscle groups, and then you go through a series of either tensing it first and then relaxing it. So you might maybe start with your feet and you flex your feet and feel that tension in your feet and then release it. And the key thing when you do progressive relaxation is to notice the difference between when the body part, the foot, the leg, whatever you're working on, noticing the difference from when that muscle is tense to when it's released. And again, as I was alluding to before, anxiety is this future-oriented thought. So if we can bring the person into the present and having them focus on these breathing exercises and on noticing the difference between the muscle being tense and the muscle being relaxed, that will sort of get them kind of out of their head and focused on the here and now. Again, also in relaxing the physiological component of anxiety as well. So again, for progressive muscle relaxation is sort of like tensing the muscle part, tensing the foot, then releasing, then working up maybe to the calf, stretching the calf, feeling that tension in the calf, and then releasing. Maybe tensing the quad and the thigh, feeling that tension, and then releasing. And all the while during this progressive muscle relaxation, you're focusing on your breath and again noticing that difference between the tension and relaxation. Another intervention that people can do is physical activity. So just having a way it also kind of deals with the physiological components of anxiety, but physical activity of either sort of sports and sort of working out, but even just getting outside and getting some activity going does wonders for one's stress and anxiety. So just going for a walk or going out and just being out of the house, away from a screen, has a world of impact on the stress and anxiety. And this is sort of more specific to sleep, but trying to minimize phone use and screen time. Adolescents, I'm not sure if any of you teens know this, but adolescents like to use their phones. I don't know if that's news to anybody, but phones and screens are I guess on some level wonderful interventions that we've had in the last maybe generation, but they can also be problematic as well. And particularly before going to bed, having excess screen time can very much impact sleep. And the reason for that is the phone basically becomes like a conditioned stimulus, where it's associated with activity, it's associated with energy, it's associated with socializing, associated with school. And those are thoughts and activities that you want to kind of get out of your head if you're trying to wind down and go to bed. So, encouraging teens and ourselves to turn off our phones, to not be on screen time for at least 30 minutes before going to bed. Let your mind wind down. And this is independent of whether you have that blue light filter thing on your phone. And just to be able to put that phone away, put the screen away altogether, and give yourself, at least 20 minutes, let's say 20 to 30 minutes of sort of screenless time as you're winding down, getting ready for bed. And that can have a world that can do a world of good on one's stress and anxiety. Other interventions are spending time with family and friends. Having social support is really important for one's mental health. And and if one is very stressed and anxiety and anxious and in their head, reaching out to family and friends is a really important intervention. As I mentioned before, prioritizing sleep is really critical for affecting stress and anxiety. You get this vicious feedback, or the vicious cycle where you're stressed and then impacts your sleep, and then you're tired and then you're more stressed. So prioritizing sleep, making that a priority is very important, particularly for youth. A quick point about sleep in youth. Prioritizing sleep also means having a regular sleep routine, meaning that you don't want to have like, oh, on weekdays, I go to bed at 10 o'clock because I gotta wake up the next morning, and on weekends, I stay up till 1 a.m. This is particularly problematic for youth. Who the term that this has actually been referred in the literature is social jet lag. Meaning if you go, if Monday through Friday you're going to bed Sunday through Thursday you're going to bed at 10 o'clock, and then Friday and Saturday you're going to bed at 1 a.m. That's basically like flying 3 hours to every weekend and then flying back. Like your body just gets so disrupted. It's almost like a jet lag you would have every week, because you don't have this regular cycle of going to bed at the same time. So as much as you can, when we say prioritize sleep, it's also prioritizing a sleep routine of when you go to bed, more or less. I mean, we're not talking about being super rigid of have to be at 10 p.m. exactly on the dot. But these huge variations that you see in teens of during the week going to bed at 10 and on weekends going to bed at 1 in the morning is very problematic for one's stress, one's even neural development, and it's something to really try to prioritize. So these interventions that we're talking about are things that people can kind of do on their own, these relaxation techniques, physical activity, prioritizing sleep, but sometimes people need professional help. If your stress and anxiety and your team's stress and anxiety is really impacting their functioning significantly when they're in school or with friends, reaching out to a therapist or your primary care doctor is very important as well, or your social worker, someone like Laura. So last thing I want to just briefly mention is as Laura mentioned, there's a couple of research studies that we're doing on depression. One is on youth. So we're looking to recruit adolescents aged 13 to 17 who are either currently experiencing depression, had depression in the past, or even have no mental health difficulties. And we're paying pretty well. That the youth receive up to $500 for participation. So they would do an interview with us over Zoom during the first day, and then come in to our lab where we're measuring different aspects of their emotional experiences in the lab. And we're also doing a study where we're looking for adults age 18 to 60 who are currently depressed, have had depression in the past, or no mental health difficulties. And sometimes people ask, well, how do I know if my depression meets eligibility for these studies? If you're interested, give us a call. And we do a phone screen, and we do also refer out to various clinics in the area. And if we have resources for both youth and adults who are trying to seek help. So again, here's our phone number, which I guess we can put in the chat, and our email address for our lab if people have questions and potentially want to participate in our paid study. So thanks. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Shankman. I am going to stop the recording right now, so then we can begin asking questions if anybody would like to do that. So just give me one moment, and I believe it's stopped. If I'm just going to check with